wasn't sure about your second point because I can't read my own notes, but you were talking, the first is capacity building, the second point was business entrepreneurs. Okay. Then the idea of visibility, that was it. Visibility, I think, I wonder, I think that there's more of a mutuality of need of making the diaspora aware of each other. And I think that there are misconceptions on both sides of the Atlantic. I think that it would be very helpful and beneficial for people who are here who have never had that opportunity to visit the motherland, literally the motherland, to work with people who are on the ground there in whatever capacity. I think that that would be valuable as the idea of people who are here and trained going back and working in the motherland, bringing whatever additional skills they might have. I just put that out there. Thank you.
I'm not sure how you like this to go. Okay, since we have 3 questions, let's answer the 3 questions, then we figure out how to proceed. Thank you, Dr. Sadler. I think in terms of the questions to be asked, I think we're here to really take on board counsel. A lot of the times, we think we have ideas and we think we have solutions, and it's more like presentation. Let me tell you what we're going to do. But I think for us, it's more about we are collectively thinking this through together. And so this is the work we've done so far, and we want to enrich it with what you bring. So I think any questions or any input that really helps in this regard in terms of really, for me, the primary question that I have is, how do I make the African Union relevant? How do I show the value added? Why would somebody bother? So I think answers to that question will be really appreciated by me, I know for sure, because it's very difficult sometimes to make the case if people don't feel like they are really benefiting. So I think just general thinking around this in this area will be good. With a connection to the Francophonie, absolutely, absolutely, why not? Actually, I don't know whether you followed, but our chairperson met with Madame Jean last week. Yeah, the chairperson of the African Union met with Madame Michaela Jean at the AU commission in Addis Ababa last week. So clearly, there is appetite for institutional cooperation between the AU and the La Francophonie. In terms of the visibility and your idea, there I absolutely agree. I think the best way to build and sustain the bond and the affiliation is by being there. And so for me, I sometimes talk a little bit about this idea of even cultural or heritage tourism, so that would be one way to really link the diaspora back to the homeland, right? Because if you go into the diaspora, into the Caribbean, which I have familiarity with, you have basically pockets of Africa. I can identify Ghanaian communities in the diaspora, in the Caribbean. They might not, I don't know whether they know they are literally duplicating the society that I grew up in. I don't know whether they know that or not, but you have these pockets of Africa that are embedded in the Caribbean. When you come to the continents, in Ghana again, you have these places that really should be visited by every African in the diaspora, including the castles, just to trace the journey, that brought people from there to here, So I think it's important for us to create opportunities and to facilitate the movement of people from the diaspora back to the continent, if only just for the purposes of heritage and connection. Yeah. Yes, sir.
We do have the microphone there. Yes.
I guess, Madam, there is a part of the question for me about specific questions. As he said, it's on two ways. It can be questions coming from the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. It can be also questions coming from the civil society and from the organizations and from the people. As he said, we are here also to interact and to take advantage from your expertise and your experience abroad to nurture the vision of the African Union in a way that it would be benefiting to the population. For example, the idea of aid. We all know that aid is something in our heads, in our minds. People are helping us, but if you look at the scheme, on the other hand, you have exploitation of our resources. You have unbalanced benefit from these resources from abroad, and the money taken out from Africa is 10 times more than the aid. This is a big challenge, how to put in our minds that we are not helped, we are helping. Nobody is helping us. We have the means, but there is a system of exploitation. If you take, for example, the issue of migration, maybe there are some solutions coming from the people, not only from big conferences between the heads of states, but from the people who send their sons and daughters abroad. I talked about this digital economy, for example. It's a way for us to get help and to get money from our money to reinvest it in Africa. How to benefit more from these resources. There is also the issue of diaspora minds. How we can leverage from the expertise from the diaspora to benefit from the country of origin, and how to organize such a transfer of knowledge. So it can be successful if there is a good interaction between the communities, the people, and the vision of our heads of states through the Agenda 2063. And this program he is explaining here can be a possibility for us to put it in action, to put it in practice, because we have the whole setup. We have a funding scheme, we have a program, we can also provide, they can provide capacity building, they can organize for us. So through this mechanism, we can come up with good solutions, and indigenous and internal and specific solutions, not imported but from us, and that's the interest of having an interaction between the African Union Commission and the people, civil society organizations, and diaspora, and communities, and grassroots communities. Donc je disais que la question, des questions spécifiques, il y en a plusieurs. Ça peut dépendre de la vision de l'agenda 2063, mais ça peut aussi venir de nous-mêmes, de vous-même. Vous avez peut-être une manière de voir les choses qui peut apporter quelque chose à ce qui se fait déjà, qui peut lever un coin du voile. J'ai donné l'exemple de la vision même de l'aide au développement. quand vous prenez l'aide au développement, nous on nous met dans la tête qu'on est aidé. Mais tout le monde sait que ce qui sort de l'Afrique en termes de ressources, ça n'a rien à voir avec ce qu'on nous donne. C'est pas comparable. Dans tous les domaines, l'aide au développement, c'est rien par rapport à la manière dont on exploite l'Afrique actuellement. Est-ce qu'il y a des solutions? Est-ce qu'on peut réfléchir là-dessus? J'ai donné aussi l'exemple des transferts de compétences, des transferts de cerveau. Comment on peut utiliser les compétences de la diaspora pour développer l'Afrique? Et j'ai donné l'exemple de l'économie numérique, où il y a beaucoup de ressources. Comment faire en sorte que ces ressources-là restent en Afrique? Et toutes ces questions-là, elles peuvent être débattues grâce à un canevas qui est donc mis en place par le SIDO et qui permet d'avoir une interaction à travers les rencontres qu'il a proposées, à travers une articulation entre la diaspora, les projets de la diaspora et leur implication sur le terrain, leur application sur le terrain, à travers une rencontre annuelle pendant laquelle on peut discuter toutes ces thématiques-là. Donc c'est un dispositif intéressant qui nous permet de capitaliser sur tout ce que nous avons comme solution pour le développement de l'Afrique.
Yes, sir.
My question is more about the people I refer to as the indigenous diasporas, because we have 3 levels of diasporans that is coming together as diaspora period. First, we have the indigenous diasporans who are descendants of slaves. And then we have diasporans that were born here by immigrants. And then we have people like myself and perhaps most of you on the panel. I appreciate the call by Africa for the diaspora to return. But as an African, and especially as a Ghanaian, I do know that part of our culture is that we do have special things put aside for visitors. So usually when I talk about the Ghanaian hospitality, I say it is second to none because of those traditions that we have in place. That there's a visitor's room, visitor's plates, visitor's cutlery, visitor's bed sheet. We have all these things and it's in every home. So when a visitor comes to Ghana, they almost don't want to return. And if I can go by this tradition, I want to see what Africa has put in place before initiating the idea of diaspora return. Specifically in Ghana, there are issues with indigenous diasporas who have returned in good faith, that up to today, they've spent about 10 years in Ghana and they still don't have their citizenship yet. I can make reference to a case in Israel, where the defense minister is a Russian. The minister of communication is from Poland. These people come there and automatically they are given positions within the government. Now, Africa is not doing that. I want to also make reference to something very special. Ghana became the hope of Africa in 1957. Much of what happened in Ghana was initiated by the African diaspora. People like L.R. James from Trinidad, and Du Bois of the United States, ideas of Marcus Garvey from Jamaica, and Malcolm X, you name it. These people actually trained Nkrumah and put in his head the need for us to get our country, our continent back. So the diaspora, in good faith, has been fruitful and useful, and they have a reference point. Africa does not have a reference point. That you come here 21st century and calling me that I should come back, that the couple of thousands of dollars I put away, I must come to a country, a continent that don't have a proper infrastructure. Now what happens when you return? And in 2 years, the holiday feeling, the return to the indigenous land feeling is gone. And then I return to this place and telling the rest of the people, please don't think of going back. So I want you to begin to show me specifically what is it that you have in place before coming here and calling the digital diaspora to return. Are you prepared to receive them and make them part of the government, that they will be able to work? And I'm telling you something. If you send an indigenous diaspora to come back here and talk to the rest of the people, they will believe them more than you. Because he will be telling them, he or she will be telling them that I've been there. These people are good. They have a proper infrastructure. They are honest. They are not corrupt. If you don't have these things in place, then I think much of what we are doing here is much ado about nothing. And that's my question.
I will make a list if there are more questions.
Thank you for organizing this event today. Very critical that we ask these questions at this particular time. My name is Malik McGregor, and I think a critical thing that kind of brings a synopsis to everything you're communicating is education, and education to our youth to kind of break the disparities. And what I mean by that is to understand who we are as African people, one, on the continent, who we are as African people indigenous to this planet, and the third thing I would say is who we are as Africans in the diaspora. Now, there's a lot of indifference to what an African person is, and I think part of the AU's work would be on a macro level to clarify that. But I think on a micro level, how do we live on a traditional level? How do we live on a modern day level? How do we live on a technological level? And begin to kind of create those platforms, but don't define it so hard that people can't exist, right? So I think the main area for me is how do you get into the realm of education from kindergarten baby all the way up to university. Similar to the idea you guys are creating, it's almost making nodes of medical, economic development, financial development, and getting the best from the community. That's how we've always grown. But at the same time, we like to create a circle where no one's left behind. I think part of the dynamic that is kind of created in Africa right now, there's the haves and then there's the have-nots, right? And we have to find a way to erase that colonial kind of past to develop that equitable mindset. So I think the question is, how do we develop that equitable mindset across the board through education? Thank you.
Thanks a lot again for the context and the background, but more importantly, as you were saying, going forward, yeah, and then some of the proposals that you have tabled. And I think for me, going back to what are the critical questions that we need to ask, yeah? And I think without really specifying the questions, I think if we start identifying what are the areas or domains where these questions need to be raised, yeah? And so for me, one is, we talk about diaspora engagement. So one critical simple question is diaspora engagement to what end? You know, what is that we're trying to achieve in terms of results, yeah? Another important area is accountability, yeah? And I think like when we talk about, engagement and having the diaspora find avenues of giving back and reaching itself in terms of experience and so on from the continent, the structures and the mechanisms that we create for that, where is the accountability for results? Yeah, I think we need to start raising that. The other comment that I would make is clarity around the levels of engagement. Yeah, by that I mean, you were talking earlier on, for example, one of the mandates of your office is to support member countries in terms of their own policy and practice around diaspora engagement. And earlier in the day and this afternoon, there was mention about the good experiences in Ethiopia, Rwanda, and then I think Ghana maybe. And I think so I think when you look at the levels of engagement, there is country level diaspora engagement. You see there are a lot of young people, a lot of professional groups that are engaging at their country level, not necessarily at the continent level. Yeah. So where does that fit into in this approach or action plan when you think about the diaspora engagement? The other one is regional engagement. There is regional diaspora engagement. There are regional bodies that actually engage the diaspora. the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, or ECOWAS, or SADF. Yeah, Ambassador Muallim himself has been here to Toronto from IGAD and engaged in the 8 countries diaspora there on a number of issues. So again, that's another level. Yeah, and so for me, the question is, what's the Pan-African level of engagement here? When you think about, the Pan-African story there, which is not the country engagement, which is not the regional engagement, there has to be some coherence in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of the levels of engagement. Another area that I ask myself is, I don't think we have an appreciation of the level of noise, good noise, so to speak, between Canada and the continent. So there is a lot, you mentioned yourself, professional association, faculty, and so on. Yeah? It might be a good exercise for us here at the 6th region to actually catalog the exchange of energy that exists between Canada and the continent, yeah, whether it is in the area of education or health, trade, civil society. We have, for example, here in this province, we have the Ontario Council for International Cooperation, which has member NGOs that do work in Africa, for example. There is the Canadian Council for International Cooperation. So that's some of the civil society players that are engaging on a number of issues with Africa. I don't know if there's a platform or a place we can go to find out what's happened, who is doing what. I mean, we spoke about CUSO, for example, and we heard from CUSO today, yeah? One important player there, yeah? So, but if we have a good picture of the level of engagement, would be good. I think we need to start paying attention in terms of not reinventing the wheel. When some stuff is working, for example, in Ethiopia or Rwanda or Ghana or some other places, how can your office work with the 6th region in terms of almost using innovation to scale up and replicate what's already working? Yeah? So there's some good stuff that's happening in Southern Africa or West Africa that we might not know in other regions in the continent. Yeah? And if the diaspora is engaging, where can we go to actually find ways to scale up and replicate rather than start from scratch? Yeah? Maybe innovation labs could be one approach in terms of doing that. Yeah, I think we have not spoken a lot today. There was mention, I think, in your message from the chair about migration. I think this migration has become such a constant factor in what's happening globally. And I think we talk a lot about what's happening in Europe and so on, but Africa is hosting the largest number of refugees. Uganda has now more than 1 million refugees, Ethiopia close to 1 million, and so on. So what's the role of the diaspora around that? Yeah? Last year in October in Brussels, I co-organized an international event on migration, trauma, and peace leadership, for example. Yeah? At York University here, there is a group that does post-secondary training in refugee camps in Somalia, Dadaab, yeah? Somalia and Kenya border. Yeah? So what's the role that we can think of when you talk about this constant stuff of migration? Then there's the whole question of, for me, it's like, what's the role of the diaspora and the 6th region and the African Union in restoring and protecting the dignity of Africans? Wherever they are, whether they are in Canada or other parts of the world, when that dignity is affected, it affects all of us. So we have seen playing time and again in our TV sets, in the news, how the dignity of Africans is corroded and compromised in Libya, in the Sinai, in the Mediterranean. We have today close to 42,000 Africans stranded in Israel. What's the role and responsibility of the African diaspora, 6th region, and the African Union in terms of really advocating about the dignity of these folks? Think about that. 42,000 Africans who cannot have refugee status because the state of Israel doesn't recognize them. They have difficulty in terms of resettling other parts of the world. And what's our responsibility in terms of advocacy here? Both for our own respective governments, but also working with you guys. So that's some of the thoughts that I have. And the last comment I would make is that maybe it's an opportunity for us to develop a diaspora engagement framework that allows us to speak to all these various dimensions that I mentioned, and some of the things that you mentioned yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
happy as answer those first. Clearly, this is a monumental undertaking. Putting it in context, we have to look at the fact that we are looking to unite millions and millions of people who have millions and millions of different perspectives and definitions of who they are. And they have different levels of engagement with where they're from. The idea of visibility and relevance and accountability, those are big ideas. If we're looking to create change, we have to begin with one core and central idea that will resonate with the millions and millions of people and unite the millions and millions of perspectives under one canopy, one vision. This is how we begin. We cannot continue to talk about all of the different areas that are burning. We have had these issues burning for a very, very long time. But we have hope when we have one advocacy that is looking to unite us in that scale. So it begins with millions and millions of people, one vision. I see the African Union as having the leverage and the opportunity to step up and begin to create that unified vision. Right now, we're still in a reactive state of mind. We're reacting to very specific issues and looking to quench the fires that will continue to burn because they are coming up from a deeper source of disparity. It's much deeper. If we're looking at a burning oil well, it's very different from a burning bush. So we have to start looking at, am I going to, and I say am I, as we are all the I am in this sentence, am I going to respond to the fire by throwing water at it, or money at it, or resources at it? Or am I going to step back long enough to identify the core source of that flame? Why is it burning? How can I channel that energy in another direction? These are the core questions that we need to ask ourselves before we become reactionary. In order to be visionary, we have to take action, not react. And so at this point, we have to critically ask ourselves, are we reacting? Are we responding? Are we taking responsibility? The definition of responsibility being I am able to respond, as opposed to taking action where I am going to take a thoughtful, strategic step forward in a right direction that's going to get at the core of what is affecting us completely and totally, and eradicate the root so that we can begin to move forward as a unified people, not people who are running in the direction of a fire trying to throw water on an oil-driven flame. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the core question? What is the core answer? What are we going to ask, and how are we going to answer that? That's how you begin a vision. You ask a question. What is it that we need to do as a people? We need to unite. So step one in unification requires connectivity. We are at a critical point in time where we've never had the opportunity before to create visibility and connectivity the way we have the opportunity to do so now in this digital age. What digital channels are we leveraging right now to ask the one critical question that everybody can respond to? We need to get people to stop thinking about the day-to-day and start looking at the 10-year, the 100-year. Every empire starts to look at their 100-year goal day one. They start looking at their 500-year goal. If Rome looked at day-to-day, it would not have had the prominence that it has right now. So if we're looking to create our modern day central civilization, we're recreating a civilization. This is the magnitude.
It is not us responding to poverty or responding to an economic disparity or responding to a certain visibility. We are literally creating a civilization from scratch. And we have millions upon millions of people that belong to that civilization inherently, and we need to unify them in one specific way. What is the question we need to ask ourselves, and what is the question that we need to answer for all of these people? So let's look at, so that's just the construct of us shifting our minds away from a reactionary type of vision and starting to look at a action-driven vision. So we need to ask a question. I'm going to step back and say this. With Unity, we have the channel resources already in place because we're in a digital age to begin to connect people together. So there's two things that you had mentioned, right? We have all of these different groups all over the diaspora, all over the continent, and they're all doing something specific. They all have their individually driven visions, criteria. We want to go in and educate them about how to do the things that they're doing better. But at the highest level, we need to figure out what our vision is before we can go in and help them with their vision. Step one, I offer this humbly to say, let us at least take inventory. Let's get data. Let's take inventory of all of the organizations that are driven towards helping moving people of color forward. First of all, we need a database to at least say, this is the level of organization available, where is it, and how can you get involved? So let's have a repository, a central repository, indicating where all of the places of action are and who's in charge, so we can get directly to them to offer our assistance on the ground where we are. So let's get that database together. Once we have that database, we can then drive funding through that understanding of what is there in terms of a channel that's directly accessing a specific part of the diaspora. So let's get the information, let's find out where everybody is, let's find out what they're responding to. Let's then operationally find a way to get global funding in a pool that's endowed, that we use the interest of that pool to then begin to fund some of these reactionary initiatives. And then we can have at least a causeway so we can get directly to all of these organizations with one email, with one post, with one, this is how we create connectivity. Because once you connect all of those different reactionary organizations and you begin to fund them, we have liquidity now, and we have their attention, we can begin to funnel that one core idea and answer that one core question. How are we going to unite as a civilization and create something that's greater than ourselves? And in what steps are we going to take this action? Not respond to anything specific, but to create what's not yet there and what has been. But we don't need to look back. We need to look forward and say, we're going to create what's not there. So the question is, what is not there? And what steps are we going to take to get to that place together? And that is all I have to say.
I think it will take one more. I've been advised that out of consideration to the very long day that we've all had to try to conclude.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologize for the delay. It's called work. So, really quickly, my name is Munzungu Nzedio. I am a daughter of the African continent, more specifically the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Born in Spain, Barcelona, came to Toronto at 3 months old. Fast forward 30 odd years later, here I am talking to you. So, with that being said, I want to kind of just connect to the last comment that was made in terms of what will a modern day African civilization look like. what are going to be the metrics of success is going to mediate the ways in which we're going to have a different kind of engagement, not only internally, but also externally. What is happening on the African continent, what we're not often discussing, is the geopolitics. The armies of the East and the West are encircling the African continent. And we are not yet having discussions in terms of how we're going to protect and defend ourselves, not only on the continent, but also across the diaspora. So with that being said, I strongly feel that there's a lot of responsibility we have to ourselves and to each other in order to mediate a number of the challenges that we face. But I also believe strongly that we have to harness the youth and our children. What is happening back home, based on what I've heard, what I've seen, is an entrepreneurial spirit. Those who are back home, those within my age group as a millennial, we are building something out of nothing. We are utilizing the resources that we have at our disposal to effectively create business opportunities in a number of the social problems that we face. So I definitely feel, as someone who is an entrepreneur, that this is an area that we have to harness and cultivate and build, because entrepreneurship is going to be the future. Ultimately, it is the one area that the European does not have too much issue with at this point in time. But I will say it's critical, and it is important that we start to discuss the ways in which we're going to develop the kind of entrepreneurial class that will be able to have the leverage in dealing with African governments who categorically refuse to address the specific, unique needs of African people. So with that being said, with an African civilization, we have to be interconnected. As the sister said, we have to be able to utilize digital channels in order to answer a number of the issues and problems that we face. And I think furthermore, in terms of just the direction the continent has to take, the diaspora has to take, we have to be in a position to fully understand the reality of our predicament. Whether we like to admit it or not, what is mediating the issues back home, what is mediating the issues in the African diaspora, is that we have categorically refused to deal with the West as the West. And if we are not going to understand that this particular entity called the West is responsible to a large degree for a number of the issues that we face, but at the same time, there are internal factors, the so-called African heads of state, who categorically refuse to acknowledge, let alone give value to what the people need and want. So what are we talking about, whether it be back home or here? It's simple. We need food, water, shelter, healthcare, education. We need the fundamental requirements needed to run and administer nations. And if we're not going to be in a position to fully articulate the kind of vision that is required in the 21st century, then we're going to regress. And we're going to find ourselves in a vicious cycle of impoverishment that's going to affect us now and affect generations in the future. So with that being said, I think in the long term, not short term, we plan for the next day, people plan for centuries. If we're not going to handle our business and do what has to be done, then we're going to find ourselves stuck in a place of economic subordination, and that cannot continue. I will leave on this note. There is a book by Brzezinski called The Grand Chessboard. In that book, there's only one quote that I remember, which is what? He speaks about how there's going to be a number of changes in the West and the East, meaning that there's going to be a greater geopolitical alignment between nations of the West and nations of Asia. And he said, if there is an alignment, if there is a synchronicity in terms of the interests and the objectives of both sides of that part of the world, he said this, and I quote, Africa will be completely subjugated. Are we willing to understand the reality of the personality that we're dealing with? That is all I have to say. Sorry? Oui, je parle français.
Tu peux le faire en français?
Oh, ok. C'est du travail.
Allons-y, on a des intervenants francophones.
Oh, ok.
Juste une petite
Un petit.
Oui,
Ok.
c'est ça.
Ok. Rapidement, bref, je m'appelle Munzungu, d'origine congolaise. Ce que j'explique en anglais, c'est vraiment simple. En tant qu'Africains, nous avons un grand défi et une très grande responsabilité pour non seulement comprendre la nature de notre situation, mais nous devrons être en mesure d'effectivement comprendre que l'Afrique est abondamment un continent qui est riche en mesure de culture, de religion, de spiritualité, de langue. Donc, c'est vraiment, vraiment important que nous puissions comprendre les enjeux politiques, dans le sens que les nations de l'Occident, les nations de l'Asie, ils sont prêts à tout niveau, au niveau social, politique, économique et culturel. Donc, en tant qu'Africains, si nous ne sommes pas en mesure de comprendre notre réalité, mais en même temps d'exprimer une vision qui sera une vision indépendante, une vision qui nous permettra effectivement de diriger les nations africaines. Donc malheureusement, je crois que nous allons rester dans un cercle vicieux de pauvreté. Donc j'explique ceci dans le sens que nous avons une responsabilité et en même temps, nous devrons se connecter avec la diaspora. Et moi, personnellement, en mesure de ce que je fais en tant qu'étudiante, en tant qu'entrepreneur, je crois que nous avons une très grande responsabilité pour effectivement guider la prochaine génération d'Africains pour vraiment s'engager dans l'entrepreneuriat et effectivement de développer une classe économique qui pourra mener au pouvoir économique. Donc ceci est le message que j'ai pour aujourd'hui. Donc j'espère que c'est compréhensible à tout niveau. Merci.
Mine is very short and straightforward. The theme of this meeting was about, corruption in Africa. Just quickly, back in the days in Paris, I was very young age. I have a background in finance and investment. And when I finished my study, I was so kind of excited to go to Africa, to do something about Africa, to help my people, to give back to the community, to do something. But I was held back to do that. You know why? Because it's always negative feedback for those that try to go there and do something. We have corruption. It's a big issue. Until now, what do you guys are doing as a commission? Because I think you have a lot of power because you're Africa United, meaning that you're talking to head of the countries, you're talking about presidents, ministers, all the people that are kind of in charge, I put it this way. What do you guys do to change that mindset of corruption? Because it scares us away to come back. You know what I'm saying? Because you come with a great idea to do something, you go with a lot of motivation, and like 2 years, or maybe not 2 years is very optimistic, I would say 6 months, you're like, I'm back home, damn, I'm not part of this. What you guys are doing to change the mindset, to change the environment, and bring more positivity, more optimist, result. I'll put it this way. Let's just start there. What you guys are doing about it, because it's still there, and it's getting even worse. People I left maybe 10 years back. When I go now, it's even worse than when I left them. So what are we doing about it? That's my question. Is very simple about corruption. What is the strategy in place to eradicate or even lower corruption in Africa? Thank you. Alors, ma question était très simple. Quand j'ai fini mes études il y a quelques années, j'avais envie de rentrer au Cameroun, parce que moi je suis du Cameroun. Et pas forcément le Cameroun, je veux dire même le Nigeria, à ce niveau, franchement, peu importe. Mais mon problème est le même, parce que quand je vois des amis qui sont rentrés, et que ce soit des États-Unis, de la France ou bien du Canada, et qui sont rentrés avec des grandes idées, de faire des choses, ils reviennent toujours déçus. Déçus parce que il faut faire des courbettes, il faut tout l'argent qui était supposé être un investissement, on finit par donner des pots de vin, finalement ton idée n'aboutit même pas. J'ai vu des gens qui sont allés pour ouvrir des pharmacies. Il y a tellement de blocages. Pourtant, le peuple a besoin de ces services. Ils ont besoin du travail. Ils ont besoin qu'on leur donne du travail. L'entrepreneuriat, moi, je suis une fan de l'entrepreneuriat. Mais quand je pense rentrer en Afrique, ce qui me fait peur personnellement, c'est la corruption, c'est le manque d'organisation. Et je me demande, qu'est-ce que United Africa fait pour éradiquer ce problème ou bien améliorer les conditions de retour des gens de la diaspora qui ont des bonnes intentions pour changer les choses au pays. Merci.
I have questions for. I was actually going to say I have answers to lift all of that gloom. Just give me like till tomorrow. Okay, so I'm going to really quickly run through. I think we can we can organize some of the questions into groups or categories, and then I will just answer them that way. I think some of the last few questions around what is the vision, the visioning for the continent, and the reaction to the geopolitics, even the question around corruption. I see one way that we can address that at our level, and that is popular pressure. So I think sometimes we underestimate our own power to cause change in certain areas. And so I think in terms of how do we utilize the full force of civil society to bring pressure on the centers of power that are complacent at this point because they've not been challenged enough. And so that could be one way that we look at it. I think from the point of view of the AU, we have structures that are there to try to affect change and introduce changes to norms. So for instance, ECOSOC, which is a really good tool, but it's not being implemented to its optimal level. But it is a really powerful mechanism to bring pressure to bear, But to do that, you need to have the kind of organization within civil society itself, so that they can speak to power, at a level that makes a difference. For corruption in particular, it's been an age-old problem, and I think all the things you've said are true and have now been recognized by the African Union itself. As you know, every year we have a theme of the year, and the theme of the year for the current year that we are in is the fight against corruption. And so there's a whole series of initiatives that are being launched at the highest level, because this is usually led by a member state, a head of state, to really look at the root causes of this issue and how our countries can organize themselves to combat it. For corruption, I think what we do at the Union is we try to support our member states at the policy level. So the capacity building work that we do, we tell them, look, you want the diaspora to come and participate in the economy. This is the experience that they have had. This is what they have identified as, obstacles. And corruption is usually at the top of that, So we try to urge, we try to advocate, we try to share experiences of other countries that have done things better, to try to kind of orient them towards a path that is a bit less problematic. I think with corruption, obviously, you always need to come back to the economic conditions that we have on the continent. As long as we have not provided opportunities for our people to have decent lives, corruption is always going to be there as a recourse for people. And so really what we need to do is to put in place the kind of policies and programs that help lift people out of a place where they feel they have to rely on bribes and things like that. It's an unsatisfactory answer, but it's a huge question. To address the question from my compatriots around the stratifications of the diaspora community, for us, we try not to buy too much into the different categorizations of the diaspora. We are obviously aware of them, but the dynamics in the community can be quite problematic. Maybe not here in Canada, it's super organized, but in the US, you have very tangible conflict between the so-called recent arrivals and the what we call the historical diaspora. I think for us, we are open to engaging everyone. You know, our definition of the diaspora encompasses everyone, regardless of when you might have left the continent. With regard to the specifics of your question, though, in terms of diaspora return and citizenship and things like that, again, at the AU, we try to support policy. Remember, we are not like the EU. The EU is a legislative, it's an executive union. The EU, European Union, they make laws and regulations. Everybody has to follow them. Ours is not like that. The AU is not like that. It's still a political club. And so the AU, for instance, cannot go to Cameroon and say, you know, give citizenship to this person or that person. But we try to orient them. We try to share best examples. You know, look at this country. They did this successfully. You know, we try to demystify the issue. Sometimes member states are resistant to the idea, particularly of granting citizenship, because they feel that there are some consequences politically, you know, in the population and things like that. But then we can show them, oh, this country actually followed through, and you know, you can follow their example and so on and so forth. So I think we just try to urge and orient them and give them access to good information, you know, so that they can make some of these decisions. I think for us, we want to stress engagement. It's not necessarily return. I mean, we are quite conscious that you don't have to return to make an impact. I mean, if somebody wants to return, obviously we want to create conditions for their return. But I don't think diaspora engagement has to correlate to diaspora return. We need to put in place mechanisms to support people so that they can engage at whatever level that they are at. So we ask as advocates to our member states to kind of facilitate and integrate, you know, people that want to come back. But at the end of the day, it's still a sovereign decision. You know, we have 55 member states; they are all sovereign states, and you know, you can't basically make decisions for them, but we try to help to guide them towards the right decisions. There was a question about education and how it needs to be kind of Afrocentric and to valorize African values. I absolutely agree with you. I think we need to do some work on the curriculum in our countries. I think a lot of the things we teach our kids are actually imposed. They are not necessarily generated by Africans for Africans. So one of the things that you might find interesting in this regard is we are working on the Encyclopedia Africana project, which is a project that was launched by Dr. Nkrumah in 1963 and was meant to organize African life, organize the history of Africans and African life to be written by Africans and consumed by Africans. You know, so if you want any reference point on any aspect of Africa or the people that live in Africa, you don't go to the Encyclopedia Britannica, you go to the Encyclopedia Africana, and that will be the authoritative source of information. So this project is now part of the Agenda 2063 that we're pursuing, and we have a target to have it relaunched, because it was actually launched way back in the 60s and then it kind of died off. We want to relaunch it by the end of the first 10-year implementation plan of the Agenda 2063, which is in 2023. There were some comments, largely from Mr. Emmanuel. I agree with them in principle. I think in terms of diaspora engagement, to what end? Well, the way that I understand it, it has to be diaspora engagement that's responds to the needs and the interests of both parties, the diaspora and the continent. So for me, when I look at the diaspora, how do we create space for their participation in Africa, in our member states and the African Union? Because you can't just go all the time with your hand out, give me this, give me that, without granting access and the part in the decision making. So for me, it has to be a two-way street. You talked about the different levels. Absolutely, there's national level, regional level, and continental level. A lot of the work that we do at the African Union Commission is to harmonize all three levels, because it has to kind of make sense, it has to be coherent across all of the different levels. You mentioned the catalog of Canada-led interventions in Africa, who is doing what and where to find that. I'm looking at Fana and Tina. I would say in Canada, probably OCIC, CCIC, Global Affairs will be the ones that will have the information there. But absolutely, we need to know. Because then by knowing, we know where the gaps are, so we can best optimize our interventions. In terms of scaling up best practices, absolutely, I agree. This actually goes to some of the comments made by my sister from DRC. We are doing, in terms of youth engagement, for instance, we are doing a toolkit for our member states, to help them. This is the way that you go about, this whole diaspora engagement business, right? Because right now, where the political will is and where the technical capacity to deliver is quite far apart. So we're trying to help them. And one of the things that we do with youth engagement, youth and entrepreneurship, for instance, is we try to support projects to scale up diaspora SMEs. So young people in the diaspora that are active, they have startups. We want to support them to grow their businesses. So how do you transition from a startup to to wider operations, basically? So we do quite a bit of that. The role of diaspora in the migration and refugee crisis or debate. I think here you don't even hear of it as much because North America is very removed. When you come to Europe, it's absolutely, it's ridiculous the extent to which it's taken. But for us, I think as a continent, remember 80% of all migration in Africa is to other African countries. So it's very difficult for us to take the Germans seriously when they say, oh my God, the Africans are invading our country, do something about it. Most of the Africans that leave Africa go to other countries. And so I think you have to understand, you have to have the statistics, first of all. Again, the vast majority of Africans that enter Europe enter legally. And I mean vast, I think, I forgot the actual number, but I think it's over 80%, over 90% enter Europe legally. So it's easy to develop a narrative of the Africans are coming, but in reality, that's not the case. But we do have a Department of Social Affairs that is responsible specifically for this migration issue. The role of the diaspora and AU success in restoring the dignity of Africans. I think in terms, and this related to trafficking and enslavement and things like this. Again, I come back to our own capacity to affect pressure on our government. We need to sort of find the pressure point because difference can be made. You just need to find the right place to kind of squeeze. So for instance, this issue with Libya, everybody knew. You think countries didn't know that there was slavery going on? They knew, but they did nothing. But when it went on CNN, they formed a task force, they brought planes to take people away, and they started a mechanism to do something. So they got embarrassed. So you need to find a way to kind of bring the issue to the point where they will do like real meaningful work on that. And then to attempt to respond to my sister on the vision and how to have a vision, and how to create a vision for a civilization as opposed to interventions to fight fires. We actually do have it. We have it. So the AU, 3 years ago in some years ago in 2013, I can't count anymore. In 2013, the AU had its 50th anniversary. So they all sat down and decided, we've traversed the last 50 years. now we're gonna like think forward the next 50 years. Where do we want to see the continent in 50 years? So what is the Africa that we want in 50 years? So this is called the AU Agenda 2063, and it basically encapsulates precisely what you're saying. I think what we need to do is to do a better job of mobilizing awareness around it and building the support of our diaspora and our citizens around it. Because when you look at it, it actually is a very transformational plan that thinks in big, it's big ideas and big terms, and it's not about we need to douse this fire or anything like that. It's more transformational. But I think the question is, how do we get people to know about it first of all? Because it's not very well known, even on the continent. And if people don't know about it, they can buy into it and they can't tell you how they can support it. So I think what we need to do is to do a better job letting people know about the AU Agenda 2063, which, by the way, is much more transformational in its nature than the SDGs. So when they were preparing the SDGs, we had a common African position based on the Agenda 2063. So the two are very consistent with each other. We actually report the indicators are similar. So they're quite well thought out. I think we just need to do a better job getting visibility and mobilization around it. Is there any more database of who is doing what? Well, one of the things that we can do through this network is this idea of mapping. So you need to map the community. We did this successfully in Europe. Actually, we got money from the German government, and we did a mapping study of the African diaspora communities in 5 countries. And so it's not just the quantitative stuff in terms of the numbers, but also even the qualitative stuff that my sister from Cameroon was saying in terms of what was my experience when I went to Cameroon to try to set up a business. You have to get all of that stuff to put before the governments. This qualitatively was the experience of the diaspora when they tried to come back and engage. And these were the obstacles. So how do you organize yourself as a government? What kind of policy interventions you introduce to address it? So I think we can, I won't say easily, but we can reasonably do that within the framework of this partnership. I think if we were to go to, say, like Global Affairs and say, hey, we have this partnership and we want to do a project to map our diaspora community, I think that's something they might be receptive to. I think that's, my sister from DRC was mentioning how to address the global structural imbalance. That's a huge one. Again, I think, for me, I'll fall back on what do we do as a citizenry, to bring these issues to the attention of our governments. We need to put pressure and we need to advocate and lobby and make them know that these are important things to us and they need to organize themselves in that way. So I think that's probably the questions as they came in. I can see Chairman Macaulay looking at me. So I would like to take the opportunity once again to really express my sincere appreciation for you, for your being here. It's been quite a long day, but the work that has gone on in the background, has been even longer, and I'm sure Sister Barbara and Chairman Macaulay and Sister Sandra will tell you. But I feel like it's been very much worth it. I think that we're in a better place now this evening than we were when I was here 18 months ago. I think that we've been able to put things together in a way that provides a real roadmap for the way forward. Tomorrow we're going to Ottawa, and we're going to be having these conversations in front of the people that can support us, policymakers in government and elsewhere in the international development sector. So I am really confident. I hope that next time I'm back here in maybe a year's time, we will be giving a progress report on implementation of real, actual activities that we've been able to do. So again, accept my congratulations, Brother Macaulay, and my thanks on behalf of the chairperson of the African Union Commission and on behalf of my director, who unfortunately couldn't be here, for your continued partnership. And we look forward to another year, our first formal official year under this partnership. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. It's been quite interesting session. A lot of questions and very thought-provoking ideas, and it's really been amazing tonight. Once again, thank you for the delegation. Did an amazing job by summarizing and being able to address those concerns and questions that were brought on the table. Now, we don't want you to stop here. Please send us more questions if you have them. Nana is that I can tell you for sure, he will respond. Any questions that you still have, or thoughts or ideas that you have, please send us an email, and we know for sure that those will help with the process of making sure that we reach the goal that we're looking for. I would tell you for sure, I've been privileged to be part of the African Union process, or the OAU, for more than 20 years now. I've been engaged with the OAU and all that through all the different transitions and through different processes. I've been part of different consultation meetings, even the diaspora toolkit that he mentioned. I've been part of that consultation at the AU in bringing ideas on the table and what we can do to move forward. And also with the ECOSOC, the formation and launch of the, so these are the things that we're looking forward, that as we move forward in the next 1 year, there will be more, progress report coming from that. And once again, we're still looking to occupy our seat at the ECOSOC Assembly. It's been a long time now. Since 2005, we're still talking about the diaspora occupying the 20 seats at the Assembly. So we're hoping that those things will be formalized as quickly as possible, that we will move to that progress, this progress that we're talking about. So once again, thank you all so very much. I know that if we have the opportunity, every one of you will want to ask questions or say something or add to what has been said already. But also, so many of you have been around since morning, up till now. So, job well done. Thank you so very much. We appreciate you all, and we're looking forward to what's going to happen with this great partnership that has been launched this year. So tomorrow we will be going to Ottawa. There is still an engagement forum that will be happening at the Mali Embassy tomorrow in Ottawa. So if you have any of the community leaders that you know, please reach out to them to meet us there. And also there will be a celebration of the Africa Day, which is tomorrow is the official Africa Day, which is May 25th. And so there will be celebration at the Chateau L'Oreal Hotel, where we'll be doing several things to mark this occasion with the Government of Canada and so many others that will be on the table.
The Chateau L'Oreal.
Well, I'm looking forward to next, it will be Macaulay Carlo Hotel, or the African Union 6th Region Hotel, and that's what it should be. It should be African Union Hotel and things like that. It should be more of our names being heard than some of this. So we're getting there very soon. We have a hotel by one of our own that's going to be launched in November this year. The first hotel of a person of African descent or African Canadian. It's being built right now close to the airport, and that will be opened in November. So we are happy and proud to know that we have one of our own building a hotel that's going to be open this year. And so we'll be having more places to use for things like that. So once again, we thank Duvalier Park Hotel for the great hospitality they've been offering us for several years now, and they've been taking good care of us. And most of the people who are here at the hotel are people of African descent. Our brother there, who is also serving us, is from Egypt. We know him very well. He's been coming here for several years, and he's been serving here. The manager here is from Madagascar, Jamaica, and we have so many of them who are here, who are people of African descent and really doing well. Once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. I want to thank Zoom Media and Zoom Group for covering this and putting it live. A lot of people were watching live. I was watching on my Facebook as well, seeing a lot of people connecting. I'm glad that we're able to do it in English and French, because it's a lot of French francophonies as well that we're watching online, and we have Black Inspire as well that put it also. So we have a lot of people that, even though they are not here, but they were able to connect. I have a lot of people in Ottawa and in Quebec area that were really tuning into this, and so we are very happy that this was quite productive today. So once again, thank you very much. I won't go and try to speak French, so please don't expect me to. I'm still studying. I am, actually. Hopefully, I will be able to do justice to it, but I don't want to embarrass myself and spoil the beautiful language as well. So I'm looking forward, and it's not only going to be English and French, but we have our Swahili as well, because Africa is looking towards having its own language. I don't know how many of you know that we launched African Union Passport. I think it was last year, I believe, July. Last year we had one passport, which is a process that, we will make sure that it gets to everybody. So we're making progress. Trade agreement has been signed. 44 nations, that's a progress. Security-wise, just like you said, when the African Union want to do something, they really do it. I don't know how many of you have heard about the good transition during different issues, different countries. In Gambia, they stepped in to make sure there was no issues with the ECOMOG, military, In Zimbabwe, there was a peaceful transition. In South Africa, it's peaceful transition. So the continent is really making progress. There's a lot of good things that are happening that we should be talking about as well. And also, please, if you've never been to the continent, visit. And we are planning a trip in August. So whether you're online or you're listening, please join us. There's a trip we're planning in August from the basically 21st of August till September. We just came back with a trip. It's a group of people from Ghana in March. And so we also giving the opportunity for those who want to go to Ghana again, because a lot of people want to go to Ghana, and probably we're planning Nigeria as well, because so many people are asking to go to Nigeria, so they are very close. So we have Ghana, we have Benin, we have Togo, we have Nigeria, they're very close, and some want to go to Ethiopia. So we also want to thank our partners, Ethiopian Airlines, who has been very supportive and very helpful whenever we call on them. And you get a good deal if you fly Ethiopian Airlines, that's for sure. So please go to the Facebook on Ethiopian Airlines Canada and like it. I mean, you can do that right now, because every time we meet, they want to see those numbers. Please go to Ethiopian Airlines and please like it. And also we have our partners at Bowen Immigration, who's been helping our community a lot as well. We want to thank Bowen Immigration and staff for the great job that they are doing. There's a lot of issues that you don't know about. We have people in prison, in detention, so many of them that we don't hear about, we don't talk about. And please, whatever you can do to support that, we will really appreciate you, lending your support, your ideas, financially in any other ways possible. We will really appreciate. So on this note, we bring in this day to a close. Celebration goes on. This is the beginning of the celebration. We celebrate till next year. So it's a full-on celebration. Every day is Africa Day. It's not one day. And so please don't stop today. Don't stop here. Keep talking about, who we have. We have Reverend Seals in the house. Thank you so very much for being here, pastoring one of the oldest churches in our city. And so we once again want to say thank you so very much, and happy Africa Day, and God bless you all. So please meet one another. If you've not met people, exchange cards and network and talk to each other. So many great minds and ideas here. Please talk to one another and let's continue the conversation. We'll be calling a meeting soon for all member groups, member organizations of the African Union 6th region. There will be another forum very soon that we'll be calling to address some of the things that are brought on the table and to see how we can move forward with the partnership. So please look towards those emails that will be coming your way. Thank you.